The green rush is real. From lawmakers and investment bankers to CEOs and investors, we'll look at how people are transforming cannabis from the shadows of the black market into a cash crop that draws in cannapreneurs from Hollywood to Wall Street. Here to help you navigate the business of cannabis, please welcome Lewis Goldberg and Ann Donahoe. Brought to you by KCSA Strategic Communications.
Welcome to The Green Rush. I'm Ann Donahoe with my co-host Lewis Goldberg. And today we have the honor of speaking to one of the true pioneers in the industry, Kris Krane from 4Front, which is a leading investment and management firm in the cannabis sector. In addition to their advising business, they've developed a national platform that consists of a multi-state footprint, including its mission-branded retail operations. Kris, in addition to being overall awesome, is one of the very few people who can say they've been in the legal cannabis industry for nearly 20 years. While in college at American University, Kris helped lead the chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML. From there, NORML went ahead and hired him out of college, and then he was off and running. He eventually became the Associate Director of NORML from 2000 to 2005, and Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy from 2006 to 2009. Prior to forming 4Front, Kris also served as the Director of Client Services for Cannabis, which was a pioneer in developing best practices within the medical cannabis space. He serves on the National Cannabis Industry Association Board of Directors, as well as the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association Board, which is the largest nonprofit association.
You're fumbling because I didn't say hostess with the mostess.
I'm fumbling because there's so much cred to add to Kris. So sorry. So the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association Board, which is the largest nonprofit association in the state dedicated to the legal cannabis industry. Kris, welcome to the Green Rush.
Thanks for having me on.
Did I get any part of your bio wrong, or do we need to add anything?
No. Okay, got it all right. I could add, but I think that's plenty.
Okay. Actually, when she was writing it was like a scroll unrolling, like it just kept flowing and flowing and flowing.
Kris is a Gemini. He likes long walks on the beach now. So tell us. I've given kind of the overall about 4Front, but it's really changed since you founded it in 2011. Can you tell us about the evolution of the company?
Sure. So we started as a consulting business called 4Front Advisors, still around. And in our earlier days, we focused exclusively on working with clients, where we would take them through the very complex process of navigating the licensing process to get a license to operate a cultivation or cultivation facility, processing facility, dispensary in these highly competitive application processes in states across the country. And then we would provide them with a operating model for their retail dispensaries. So that would include the operational policies and procedures, all their operating protocols, job aids. We would help them hire their management team, and we would take them through a training program to train them on how to operate a high-level dispensary. And that business, we operated exclusively on the consulting side until about mid-2015. And in 2015, we launched a company called Mission Partners. We also launched a parent company called 4Front Ventures. So all of our companies are underneath the same, owned by the same common parent. And at Mission Partners, we acquire and operate these licenses ourselves. So Mission is our retail dispensary brand. Our first dispensary that we operate opened last July in Chicago. Our first cultivation facility opened a few months later, just outside of Chicago. And we are actively in the process of building out Mission-branded dispensaries and cultivation facilities in Massachusetts, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, all of which will be rolling out between this spring and this fall. And we also are waiting to hear back from a few other states as well, where we're pursuing licenses, places like Arkansas, Ohio, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and a few others on the way soon.
So you've changed your model from being a consultant to an owner and operator, and now as an operator with your company's credibility and capital on the line. How do you decide where to target states or even countries to set up Mission operations?
Sure. And as you mentioned, we do both. So we didn't just transition from doing consulting to operating. We still have a consulting business. So we work on both sides. As far as where we decide to target, we tend to focus on new markets. So we use the skills that we've honed over the past almost decade now at writing competitive license applications to go out and win applications anytime there's a new market. We tend to focus more on states that have competitive application processes, on states that have more limited number of overall licenses. So we're less interested in places like California, Oregon, Colorado, where there's a sort of an unlimited number of licenses across all license classes, where there is a ton of competition and the markets get really saturated. We're more focused typically on states in the eastern part of the country, where the states limit the overall number of licenses, where there's room in the markets to grow. So where you may be starting as a medical market that could expand, that could then expand into adult use. So we like to see markets where the licenses have inherent value because they're somewhat more limited, they're more scarce, and where there's room for that value to grow as the program grows and as adult use comes down the road. And then we also, as you mentioned, internationally, we have looked at some international projects. We just obtained our first international licenses in Colombia over the past month or so. So we are licensed to cultivate, extract, and export out of Colombia, although we haven't started building anything there yet. We just obtained those licenses.
So we're going to spend a lot of the time talking about what you're doing today with Forefront and tomorrow, but let's do a flashback. If we could have some of that, special effects where it goes and take you back in time to when you were at Normal and running the SSDP. You once said that the repeal of marijuana laws is our anti-war movement. Do you still feel this way?
I do, although we used to say that a lot in the early days at SSDP. This was 1998 to 2001 or so. In fact, I remember getting up at a Normal conference in I think it was April, May, June, somewhere in spring of 2001, and giving this impassioned speech about how the drug war is our generation's anti-war movement, and this was really meant to the student generation at that time. And then a few months later, 9/11 happened, and we actually had real wars and a real anti-war movement. So the rhetoric changed a little bit after that. Before that, this really was sort of the biggest war that my generation, when I was in college, was fighting against. And that changed a bit through the Bush years. It actually became more difficult for us to recruit folks into the drug policy reform movement for the few years after 9/11. Understandably, because there was a real anti-war movement for students to join for the first time, really since the Vietnam War. But as that has faded away somewhat, I think this is I think this has sort of reemerged as sort of the anti-war movement for this generation, and we've seen it. I was actually just down at SSDP's 20th anniversary conference this past weekend in Baltimore. There was 400 to 500 people there. SSDP now has chapters on over 300 campuses across the U.S. We have affiliate networks in something like 16 countries. It's actually grown to be the largest, we believe, the largest student organization, certainly the largest single-issue student organization in the United States. So whether or not it's this generation's anti-war movement, it has really sort of become this generation's movement in general of choice.
I have a bit of a follow-up. So Normal was always the flag bearer for the legalization movement, and with it gaining so much steam, and with the vast majority of the country not only supporting it but now having access to either medicinal or adult use cannabis, is it still relevant today?
You know what? I actually think in many ways Normal is more relevant today, or needs to be more relevant today than it ever has been. And the reason I say that is Normal has always been different than the other marijuana and drug policy reform organizations. And this isn't meant as a knock on the Marijuana Policy Project or the Drug Policy Alliance, who I think are doing incredibly important work. I mean, we would not have legal marijuana in most of the states that we have it today, if not for particularly the Marijuana Policy Project, and to a large degree the Drug Policy Alliance as well. They've kind of divvied up states, and they've been the ones that have been able to attract big lobbying dollars. They've been able to attract high net worth donors to help fund these causes. But Normal's in a unique position in that Normal has always been a consumer advocacy organization. Right? Normal was founded by Keith Stroup in 1970, coming out of the Ralph Nader, unsafe at any speed, consumer advocacy culture that really sprung up in the late 60s. And Keith saw the need for a marijuana consumer advocacy group. And I think as we're now moving into the era of legalization, where we're not just fighting about should marijuana be legal or not, there really does need to be an organization out there that's fighting for the interests of marijuana consumers and not necessarily for the interest of marijuana businesses and marijuana companies.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be back with Kris Krane from Forefront.
More Green Rush coming up after we roll through our sponsors.
Oh, let the marijuana llama tell you something now about a game for your phone gonna make you say, wow! The game's about the game of growing cannabis for cash. Grow the seed, sell the bud, put the savings in the stash. Little by little, your empire grows large. Put the big celebrities inside your entourage. You can choose to play with Snoop or me or Cheech and Chong, Cypress Hill, Willie Nelson, Wiz Khalifa with a bong. The name of the game is Hemp Inc., that's the point. Download and play while you light yourself a joint. The business of cannabis should be no crime. Hemp Inc. is even hot-proofed by the man who run High Times. Oh yeah? Get it on Android and iOS today. Marijuana llama out. Got to tend to me own crops, you know. Money don't make itself. Hemp Inc.
Strainwise Consulting is the most sought-after consulting company for cannabis business applications and management contracts. We consulted on the first recreational license in the world and have had an over 95% success rate on applications submitted. The industry is growing at such an exponential rate that building a powerful and lasting cannabis business is a #1 priority. Here's Strainwise's Sean Eubanks.
In our first 5 years, we branded and supported 9 medical and recreational marijuana dispensaries and approximately 160,000 square feet of sophisticated and efficient product cultivation.
Strainwise Consulting has the experience and expertise to guide you through the process.
Introducing Blue Moon CBD, straight from the bluegrass of Kentucky. With our special nano emulsion process, you'll not only get the best CBD available, you'll get more of it. Not all CBD is the same. It's your body. It's your choice. Get relief from inflammation, anxiety, and stress. Go to www.bluemoonhemp.com and use code HEMP420 for a 20% discount on your order. Balance your body. Balance your life. Make it Blue Moon CBD.
Chronicling the latest cannabis industry news and headlines, Dave Inman welcomes you to the state of cannabis. Tuesdays on demand, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Banking and Buzz, understanding the business of cannabis. Welcome back to The Green Rush, only on CannabisRadio.com.
And we're back. Thanks for listening to The Green Rush. We are talking with Kris Krane, who is the co-founder and president of Forefront. Kris, you were one of the early Cannapreneurs.
Hold on a second.
Yeah?
Yeah, the fire truck is like way too loud in the fucking New York.
I miss it.
You're welcome back anytime.
It's been 20 years. I would love to one of these days.
I had a helicopter
Wait, is it 20
hovering.
years since you've been here or 20 years since you lived here?
Since I lived there. I grew up in the city, but I left when I was 18 for college 20 years ago.
Where did you grow up?
Originally Rockaway Beach, and then we moved to the Upper West Side when I was 9. So half my childhood in both places.
Oh, nice. Okay,
City kid.
we are good. Go ahead, Ann.
So, Kris, you are one of the early Cannapreneurs making the jump from advocacy. Yeah. So, Kris, you were one of the early Cannapreneurs making the jump from advocacy to commerce in 2009. What was it like back then as compared to now?
Oh, I mean, it's not. You can barely compare 2009 to today. I mean, in 2009, there were no legal regulated markets at the state level, at least. The only legally regulated markets in 2009, early 2009 at least, were, I believe, it was like Oakland, California, Berkeley, West Hollywood, Sebastopol, and there might have been a couple more around California that were licensing retail dispensaries at the city level. There was no state in the country at that point that was licensing that was licensing these businesses at the state level. The first to really do that was Colorado, which happened in 2009 in response to the election of President Obama, and Obama coming out and saying that it was not going to be a priority for his Justice Department to go after businesses in these states. And Colorado became the first state then to issue statewide licensing. So, I mean, at that point, Colorado's marijuana industry wasn't even a thing. It was the epicenter of marijuana commerce was in the Bay Area of California, and to a lesser degree in Los Angeles, although Los Angeles was the true Wild West back then. So really, I mean, the cannabis industry was typified at that point by what we called throw open dispensaries, which was basically, somebody would find a town, they would find a storefront, they would spend as little as they could to build out a storefront dispensary. They would be selling at best gray market product because there was no licensing for cultivation at that point. There were sort of caregiver collectives, and whether they could actually do that out of a storefront was questionable whether that was actually legal. And these storefronts would basically, they would just sort of open up, and then the towns would, oftentimes the towns would come in and say, well, you can't do that, and we're going to shut you down. And the stores would have their lawyers send a letter to the town saying, yes, this is why we can do it. And the town would come back saying, no, you can't. And they kind of argue in court over the course of a few years. And, over that time, the store would have more than made back their initial investment and made a bunch of money. Eventually they'd get shut down. They'd close up shop. They'd go the next town over, and it was wash, rinse, repeat. That was the cannabis industry. That was 90% of the cannabis industry at that point, outside of those small handful of cities that decided that they would license retail.
So what was the moment that it changed? I mean, what was the moment that it went from you're saying it went from black to gray and now it's gray to green. Where was that moment? Was it when Colorado went adult use? Was it when Oregon went adult use? I mean, what was that moment that you think that there was that pivot?
I don't think you can nail down a moment. It was an evolution. So I would say the first important milestone in that evolution was the city of Oakland becoming the first city in the country to adopt licensing regulations for dispensaries, and actually have dispensaries be able to open with a license from a city and regulations that they had to follow.
And was Jerry Brown was mayor then? That was before he was governor, right?
I think he was mayor at that point, actually. Yeah, that's right. So this was in 2000. I want to say 2007.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was the mayor
then. Yes, I think that was when Jerry. And interestingly enough, Jerry Brown was not the biggest proponent of this at the time. He's always been okay on the issue, but never a champion.
He's always been much more of a different drug user than cannabis. I mean, there were stories from the 70s of him, basically swimming in something that's white.
I mean, who wasn't doing that in the 70s?
Me, you, and we were all too young.
No, I was too.
Yes.
So, I would hope that wasn't happening in the 70s. I'm too young to remember.
Yes. That's not baby powder.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to leave my parents out of this one. But no, so I think Oakland was sort of that first point. I think, from there, it was really then candidate Obama making the statement that he wasn't going to interfere with state marijuana laws, and then Eric Holder coming out saying that, yes, I'm reaffirming what the president said during the campaign. That led to this massive explosion of businesses in Colorado, and Colorado very quickly saying, well, wait a minute, we got to get our hands around this. We can't have a state full of throw-open dispensaries, and Colorado became the first state to license medical businesses. So that was a big watershed moment. And then probably fast forward to 2012 when Colorado became the first state to legalize. Colorado and Washington became the first states to legalize for adult use, and 6 months or so later, Colorado becoming the first state to actually roll out a fully legal adult use market.
Sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Go ahead. So my question is, with this tilt of, all of a sudden there's new investment, there's new money, there's new people in this industry. There seems to be a tension between the longtime advocates and the quote unquote suits in the industry. Can you talk about this and what it means for the movement itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I think a lot of us who are on both sides of this issue kind of struggle with. I think a lot of people in the movement, on the movement side in particular, struggle with this. There has been some tension between the activists, the folks who've been doing this for a long time in the nonprofit world, not making much money on it, and really doing it for the right reasons, right? Because they genuinely care. They care about whatever it is, the social justice aspect of it, the racial justice aspect of it, the personal freedoms or the libertarian aspect of it. There's people that come from across the political spectrum for different reasons to this. And now, now you have this whole new category of folks in cannabis that came into it because they saw it as a business opportunity. And I think there's certainly amongst the activists, there's definitely, and not amongst everybody, but amongst some of the activists, some animosity towards they perceive as these sort of Johnny-come-lately folks who haven't put in the time, who don't necessarily really get or care about the bigger picture issues, which I fully understand. And it's really frustrating to me when I see folks who get involved in this. They're like, no, I'm just here to make money. I don't really care about the rest of it. It's like, well, you're making money off of something that other people are going to jail for. You've got a
Right.
moral responsibility.
Yeah, but a lot of those guys are they're Johnny-come-latelys to whatever the hot industry is, right? I mean, you could have said the same thing about tech. You could say the same thing about crypto right now.
Sure, but people weren't going to jail for starting websites.
No, that's true.
At the same time, those folks were making money. So I think there's more of a moral imperative here for the industry folks to support this. But all of that said, I take a little bit of a different view of this, and clearly because I skirt that line, right? I mean, I'm still involved in advocacy. I'm still on the board, the board of trustees of SSDP, and I'm involved with issue advocacy organizations. I volunteer my time. I mean, it's important to me to keep a foot in that world to help keep me grounded. But part of what attracted me to the industry was I saw it opening up a whole new avenue for reform, and I put that on sort of two tracks, right? One, it became clear to me in the late 2000s, going through places like Harborside Health Center and Berkeley Patients Group and Peace in Medicine and some of these early pioneering dispensaries, that if you can just demonstrate to the public that cannabis can be distributed in a way that is highly professional, that's socially responsible, that it changes the stereotype that people have of what this looks like, right? It changes the stereotype of a cannabis distribution from a street level drug deal or the burnout stoners in their parents' basement to a beautiful retail store that even if you're not a consumer or patient, you're not going to be embarrassed to have it as part of your community. And I thought that was really important to helping move the overall issue forward. And we're going to change as many minds by doing this as we can with our advocacy work in DC. The other piece of this is we're attracting people to this issue who we never would have gotten before. And I remember in the days when it was really hard to fight for dollars, to fight to raise money, to advance this cause. And now we've got all of these people, all of these businesses who are in this, who, some of them get it, some of them don't. But even most of the ones that don't really get it are still incentivized to support reform in some way because they need it to expand their market. Right? If you want to expand into a new state, it's not legal there. You need to support legalization in some way. And so it's attracted a lot more money to the movement. Not enough, right? People in the industry are not doing enough to support the movement, but it still has attracted leaps and bounds more money than we had just 10 years ago because these investors, these business owners have the financial self-interest to support reform because it will expand their market base.
So that is a great point for us to take a quick break. We are talking with Kris Krane, one of the real fathers of both the advocacy of cannabis and also the commerce of cannabis. You're listening to The Green Rush, and we'll be right back.
More Green Rush coming up after we roll through our sponsors.
Cannabis concentrates have been around for hundreds of centuries. In 19th century America, extracts mixed with other herbs were sold as a miracle cure. Now, Apex Supercritical has elevated the science of extraction into the 21st century. Apex Supercritical is the leader in CO2 extraction, which is the cleanest, safest, and purest way to extract plant oils. ROI in as little as 3 weeks. Our cost-effective systems are fully automated with an industry-leading 3-year warranty. And if we don't have your system in stock, we can build one in as little as 4 weeks, bringing CO2 extraction to the masses. Learn more at apexsupercritical.com. 4-week build excludes high production systems.
Introducing 420 Cloud, ignited by MSIG, one of the fastest growing social apps around. The only app you'll need for all things cannabis. Find the latest cannabis news, videos, and stories, ranging from business and tech to sports and medicine. Start your career in cannabis by seeking, identifying, and applying for jobs through our expansive listings. For businesses, 420cloud.com features a full-scale cross-channel network, monetizing high traffic for big data conversion and analytics. Download 420 Cloud now from the iTunes Store or Google Play. MSIG.com is a publicly listed company on the OTC, symbol MCIG.
At Alternative Vibes, our core values of quality, loyalty, respect, and honesty guides us in our mission to help families find peace and harmony through our products and services. Whether you are looking for a more natural way of living, shopping essential oils, topicals, and edibles, or searching for a path towards achieving your goals, we are your choice. Learn more about our complete line of natural products and solutions at AlternativeVibes.com, bringing quality of living to life. AlternativeVibes.com.
Our mission is to discuss extraction, processing, business practices, and lessons learned with the established experts of the extraction process on Mission Supercritical, a service of Apex Supercritical. Mondays on demand, only on CannabisRadio.com.
Banking and Buds, understanding the business of cannabis. Welcome back to The Green Rush, only on CannabisRadio.com.
So we're back. Kris, thanks for joining us. You straddle this line between commerce and advocacy, and you have a lot of unique experience on both sides of the board. You talked earlier about this tension between the suits and those who came out of the black and the gray market. For people who are just getting into the industry now, if you could give them some advice, what would you want to say to the young entrepreneur who wants to get into cannabis?
To the young entrepreneur who wants to get into cannabis?
Well, it doesn't have to be like young, but it has to be somebody who's new to the industry.
This is not as easy as you think it is. That would be my number one piece of advice. Like, however long you think this is going to take, is going to take you a lot longer. However much money you think it's going to cost you to get involved, it's going to cost you 2 to 3 times as much. However much you think you're going to make less. That this is a long-term industry. There certainly are some people who are making a lot of money right now, but most of the people in the marijuana industry are still in startup mode. They may be in growth mode. They're not making a lot of money. There are major hurdles that folks in this industry face that other industries don't face, like access to banking and the 280E tax provision and, host community agreements and, towns trying to rake them over the coals for every dime they can get out of them before you even, bring in $1 in revenue. There's a lot of challenges and a lot of hurdles in this industry that I don't think people realize when they think about the quote unquote green rush, right? They think that, hey, it's marijuana. Everybody loves marijuana. It's a plant. We'll grow it. We'll sell it. We'll make millions of dollars. And this is a really hard business, right? Like, some people will make millions of dollars. Hopefully most of us will. But if you're getting into this and you're thinking about this as a, short-term get rich quick scheme, this is the wrong industry for you. If you're interested in being involved in this for the longer term and you're willing to stick it out through these rough times, the amount of growth that we have ahead of us is massive, and we're going to get there. But make sure that you're realistic about what kind of industry you're getting into, how much this is going to cost, and how long this is going to take.
So let's talk about the Northeast. You live in Boston, and in general, all eyes are on Massachusetts as the state goes adult use in July. Earlier this week, the Cannabis Control Commission released its regulations. You seemed to be lukewarm in your reception of those regulations. Can you talk a little bit about that? And will the state be up and running and smoothly running by July?
So I actually don't think I would say I'm lukewarm on the regulations. I'm pretty happy with the regulations on the whole.
Okay. I stand corrected.
By and large, well, there was an article that came out in the Boston Globe today where I had a fairly harsh quote, so I get where that was coming from. But no, by and large, I actually think that the CCC has done a very good job of this. I mean, it's taken longer than it needed to, but that's really more the legislature's fault than the commission. I think the rules overall are very progressive. I think they've created avenues for participation in the industry by people of color and communities that have been disproportionately impacted by marijuana prohibition. I think Massachusetts is really now going to be seen as a leader in diversity and equity in the industry, which I think is terrific. So they did a lot right. Where I think they messed up, they adopted a standard on the energy side of things, where any grows over 10,000 square feet are limited to 35 watts per square foot of light.
Hold on a second. So for people who don't have an idea of how big is that, is a 10,000 square foot grow big, small, average? Like how many plants are we talking about?
Well, 10,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet is kind of the border between a medium-sized grow and a large grow. But we see grows in Colorado and California and out west that are in excess of 100,000 square feet. So they can get pretty big. So this rule is going to really impact the large scale cultivators, which I think is important in a market, right? It's important that you have large scale cultivators who can grow at scale and provide the decent quality. It's not going to be the connoisseur quality product, but decent quality product at a very low price. And that can only be done at a large scale. And what the commission did was, as I mentioned, they limited those growers to 35 watts per square foot, which can only be done if you use LED lighting, right? It can't be done with your typical high pressure sodium lights that most growers use. The problem with that is that LED lights are 5 to 7 times more expensive than HPS lights, which is already by far your most expensive part of your build out for a cultivation facility. So these grows are going to go from somebody's trying to build, say, a 40,000 or 50,000 square foot grow. That's going to go from being a $4 to $6 million project to potentially a $20 to $30 million project.
Well, and the lights aren't as good right now. I mean,
that's
LED
the other
lights.
Problem.
Yeah, the quality you don't get.
Yeah, the quality is just not quite there with LEDs. It's getting better, but it's just not the same right now. So what's probably going to lead to is, at least for the larger scale growers, it's going to be higher prices for lower quality products. And I think that was an unfortunate. I get what they were trying to do. They're trying to be a leader on greenhouse gas emissions, and I commend them for thinking about this and for trying to do that. I don't think this was the right solution, unfortunately. I mean, what we should be doing is financially incentivizing these businesses to start greenhouse grows, which are you're going to have much lower greenhouse gas emissions in a greenhouse, because you don't need the light, right? The sun is free and is a natural source of energy compared to an indoor grow. So we really should be encouraging folks to do more greenhouse production. But I think saying for somebody who is going to start a large scale indoor grow, which is still how most of the industry grows, telling them they have to use LED lighting, I think is a real mistake.
I have a question that's random. You just mentioned state incentives. Are there any states that incentivize grows or incentivize any aspect of a cannabis business that you know of?
Not that I know of off the top of my head, but it's got to be coming. I mean, we do that in virtually every other industry. We provide financial incentives. We provide tax breaks for businesses that are doing things certain ways. I mean, I think, saying that if you have an outdoor grow or a greenhouse grow, we're going to cut the taxes on your wholesale sales. That would be a major financial incentive for these businesses to move their production from large scale indoor to large scale greenhouse. There's ways to do it without saying, if you're going to do an indoor grow, you have to do it in a way that's inefficient and is going to impact your quality.
So let's pivot slightly. Stay in the Northeast. You were recently added to the board of trustees to the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you've been spending a lot of time in New Jersey. And while you're not a Garden Stater, and both Ann and I are, what do you think is going to happen? And more importantly, not only what's going to happen in New Jersey, but what will this mean for the rest of the Northeast?
It's a great question. So, New Jersey is a very interesting program in that New Jersey has actually had a medical marijuana law on the books since 2001, I believe.
Yes, and Kris Krane designed it specifically to fuck everybody.
Yes, well, he did. Well, so this is the interesting thing. So Kris Krane didn't design the law. Right? The law was actually signed. The law was actually signed, or the bill was signed into law by Governor Corzine, Kris Krane's predecessor, on his last day in office. So basically, once Kris Krane won election in November, the Democratic-controlled legislature reconvened and passed a whole slew of bills that they knew that Corzine would sign on his way out, that they knew Kris Krane would never sign. And this was one of them. So Corzine signed a big host of bills on his last day in office, including this medical marijuana bill that Chris Christie then inherited the next day. And Chris Christie is notoriously anti-cannabis, arguably the worst, or one of the worst politicians in the country on this issue. And so he did everything that he could over the past 8 years to make the program completely unworkable. And that's, still today what you have. You've got something like 4,000 patients in a state that's, I believe it's 9 million people. To a massive state with virtually no patients. You've got 5 vertically integrated dispensaries that have all been just getting crushed in the market for years because there are no patients. It's a terrible program. Now, thankfully, Governor Murphy, when he was running for governor, campaigned on marijuana legalization. And so since he's come into office, he's already issued an executive order, which he did in late January, which called on his health department to study how to expand the medical program. And he actually provided some parameters for what he would like to see. So I think the first thing that we're going to see in New Jersey is within the next month or two, the health department will likely promulgate new rules for their medical program. And I think what we're going to see, and this is no surprise that most of this was in the executive order, is they're likely to expand the qualifying condition list to make it much easier for someone to become a patient. They'll get rid of some of the restrictions around maintaining your eligibility as a patient. Right now, you have to see a doctor 4 times a year, right, every 3 months in order to maintain your patient status. It's the only state in the country that does that. I think they'll get rid of things like that. And then I think that they will likely expand the number of licenses. So they may allow the existing operators to open more stores to ramp up capacity so that the process can start quickly. I think simultaneously, they will start accepting applications for new businesses. So, you're likely to see a big increase in the number of dispensaries, cultivation facilities, production facilities in the state over the course of the next year to 2 years as they roll out these licenses and these businesses start to get open. So that'll be phase 1. And then phase 2, hopefully, the legislature will pass adult use legalization. There's a lot of movement in the legislature to do that. The governor campaigned on it. Everybody's very hopeful that it'll get passed this year, this legislative session. I've been around the politics of this long enough to know that it's really hard to get one of these things passed on your first go round. So even though the political will may be there, once you start getting into the sausage making and people start arguing over details of the bill, it's possible that this gets pushed out to next year. But I'm still hopeful that they can get it done this year. And then, that takes another year or so to implement. And so ideally, if things go well in Jersey, you'll have a ramped up medical program with a really large patient base and a big infrastructure to serve the market demands that'll exist in a larger medical market, and that infrastructure can then be converted over to form the basis of a real adult use industry in the state. And if you look at where New Jersey's situated, right, New Jersey borders New York City and Philadelphia, right, 2 of the largest markets and 2 largest cities in the Northeast. And I think that would put incredible pressure on politicians in states like New York and Pennsylvania to start looking at legalization, because they're not going to like seeing all of that tax money and all of that revenue flow across the borders.
So what does this mean for you guys at Forefront? How involved are you going to be in New Jersey, or are you going to kind of sit on the sidelines until a better regulatory environment, appears?
Well, there's nothing for us to do until a better regulatory environment appears. Right? There's no licenses to apply for today. But what we can do is what I like to do. Anytime a state's looking at this, particularly where we have some decent access in the states, is to help work with the government as much as I can to help them make sure that they get the parameters of the program right. And so I think that's part of the reason why I was brought onto the board of the New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association, is to help the NJCIA and help work with folks in the government on putting together what this program may look like. So that's really the most effective thing that we can do as a company right now, is to make sure that they help get this right. And look, from a business standpoint, if we do a good job with it and we're seen as responsible and knowledgeable folks who've been helpful to the state, if that increases our chances of being able to participate in the legal market down the road, that's great. But as an old school activist myself, if in the end, all that winds up happening is I've helped New Jersey in some way implement a better program, I'm pretty happy with that on a personal level.
And I will say on a personal level, thank you, because as somebody who lives in New Jersey, Thank you.
I mean, look, there are so many patients in New Jersey, and I know some of these folks personally, who have been waiting for a really, really, really long time for this. And one of the first, just on a personal note, one of the first seriously ill patients that I interacted with in my earlier days at Normal was a woman named Cheryl Miller. She was a multiple sclerosis patient from New Jersey. Her and her husband, Jim Miller, became tireless advocates for medical marijuana. They actually got themselves arrested by blocking the door to then Congressman Bob Barr's office in D.C. and eating a marijuana brownie. Well, she was in a bed. Like, she was in a wheelchair bed at that point. She was so ill, and she ended up passing away shortly before this law was passed. She never got to see the benefits of her years of work. And there are so many patients like Cheryl in New Jersey that can benefit from this medicine that have not been able to access it, even though there's been a law in place for the last 8 years. And I think that's a real tragedy. And so I'm really hopeful that under this new administration, those patients in the state who need it will actually be able to get access to it.
Let's hold on 1 second. I'm not moving. I'm not touching the wires, so I don't know what's going on here. So we're at that part of the show that our fans have been waiting for, Kris. It's Puff Puff Pass. So what we want you to do is tell us 2 things that you absolutely love about the industry that you really have been integral in helping to build, and the one thing that you want to pass on.
Sure. All right. So 2 things I love about the industry. First, the people. It's great people in the cannabis industry. I've gotten to interact with some really awesome folks from all across the country. I mean, I'm really fortunate. I get to travel a lot. It's taxing. It's particularly taxing on my family, and I owe my wife like everything for putting up with these sacrifices that we're making to get this done. But through this process, I get to meet some really interesting and smart people all across the United States, and I get to see some really awesome places that I probably would never have gotten to if it weren't for cannabis. So that's been that's been great.
Okay, Kris, and your second puff?
So for my second puff here, I would actually go back to what we were talking about earlier, and that is, I love the fact that this industry is leading to the legalization of cannabis and the end of cannabis prohibition. That's why I got involved in this in the first place. I didn't see this as something that I could make millions of dollars doing. Although if eventually I can, that'd be great. But I've dedicated my life and my career to ending prohibition, to ending the drug war, and we're doing that. Right, like by going state to state and ending prohibition in each state and setting up these markets and showing the world that we can cultivate cannabis under highly regulated conditions. We can produce all these really cool new products. The product side of things are so different now than they were just 10 years ago. Right, we didn't know what vape pens were back then, and in doing so, we are actually ending prohibition, and I think that's incredible. I don't think there's another industry out there that you could point to that is having such a profound effect on changing social policy as what we're doing in the cannabis industry.
And your pass?
How hard this is. I think just people tend to think that this is a license to print money, and this is it's so easy. We're just going to grow a bunch of marijuana and sell it, and it's really, really hard, right? Everything takes so long. There's so many hurdles that it's I would love it if and when we get to the point where obtaining a license to open a marijuana business is and then being able to run that business has the same challenges as being able to obtain a liquor license and run a liquor store. It's just not the case right now. I was actually going to go with the puns. That's because but I figure in a segment called Puff Puff Pass.
Yeah, but you're in the middle of a pun right now. So.
Yes.
Right. Exactly.
You did a Puff Puff Pass. That's okay.
Yes, you did, and you didn't bogart that segment. So thank you.
Awesome.
So thanks again to Kris Krane, co-founder and president of Forefront. Check them out at forefrontventures.com and on Twitter at Forefront Ventures. That's the number 4 front FRONT Ventures. Thanks as always for joining us. And if you can press that little button there that says subscribe and go on to either iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to this and rate us. Hopefully you'll give us a good rating. It really is helpful. It lets more people find us. The more people that find us, they can hear guys like Kris talking about what we have talked about. And Kris, we definitely want to have you back. We didn't get to talk about social justice. We really didn't. There's so much that we didn't get to talk to you about. And you are truly a wellspring of amazing insight into this industry. As you, our listeners, continue to pay attention, make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle @GreenRushComms. A special thanks, as always, to Nick Opich, our associate producer, and Brasco, who is the game and is that damn good.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast or redistribution without proper consent of CannabisRadio.com is prohibited.